They said it was just temporary. But the moment I saw my name off the bedroom door, I knew it was permanent. The chill hit me before I even turned the doorknob. Not from the October wind sneaking through the cracks of our old Ohio house, but from the eerie emptiness of what used to be my room. The door, once labeled with the crooked Ethan sticker I slapped on it as a kid, was bare. No photos on the walls, no bed, no shelves. Just freshly vacuumed beige carpet and a lingering scent of lemon cleaner, as if they were erasing me one Lysol wipe at a time. Mom was standing in the hallway, arms folded like this was all very logical. "We didn't want to spring it on you, honey," she said, her tone soft but firm. "Tiffany needs the space. She's 7 months pregnant. That little corner you've got in the garage just until after the baby's born." I looked past her toward the living room where Brandon lounged on the couch, scrolling through his phone like this was just another Tuesday. He didn't even stand up. "Sorry, bro," he said, barely glancing at me. "It's just for a bit." Just for a bit. The phrase echoed as I stood in the garage 10 minutes later, holding a pillow under one arm and a single blanket under the other. The lawnmower sat in the corner like a mocking roommate. Above me, the bare bulb flickered and buzzed, casting a weak yellow circle on the concrete floor. My breath fogged in front of me. No insulation, no heating. Just a hand-me-down cot, 2 folded towels, and a shelf of paint cans I hadn't touched since senior year. I didn't speak a word. Not to them, not even to myself. But something shifted inside me, quiet, heavy, sharp. When I came back from the house with a cup of water, I passed by my old bedroom, now theirs. The door was shut. Laughter filtered through the drywall. Tiffany's high-pitched giggle. Brandon's stupid chuckle. They had made themselves at home. In my home. That night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the fridge from the other side of the wall. My blanket barely covered my knees. The cold seeped in through the concrete beneath me, wrapping around my spine like a wet rope. I stared at the garage ceiling and told myself to get used to it. Temporary, just until the baby comes. At 3 a.m., I woke up trembling. My toes were numb. The bulb overhead had burned out at some point, plunging everything into an unsettling quiet. I pulled the blanket tighter, but it didn't help. My breath hung like smoke above me, and in the darkness I thought, this is my home, and I'm not even a guest in it. I heard footsteps from inside, the sound of the bathroom door closing, the toilet flushing. Then silence again. By morning, my spine ached from the cot's metal bars digging into my back. I dragged myself to the kitchen, half expecting someone to acknowledge the absurdity of all this. Maybe even a "how'd you sleep?" But no one looked up. Tiffany sat at the dining table in one of Mom's old flannel robes, spooning cereal into her mouth like she belonged here, like she'd always belonged here. When I reached for the coffee pot, she didn't even glance up. "Can you get me almond milk when you come back from work?" she said. She didn't say please. They didn't need to say it out loud. Every cold night I spent in that garage screamed what they thought of me. By mid-October, the chill in the garage became bone deep. I woke each morning with my breath frozen against the cot's thin sheet, my joints aching like I was twice my age. The floor felt colder than ice, even through the cardboard I'd flattened beneath the cot to block the draft. And yet not a single soul inside the house seemed to notice or care. I still paid the electric and water bills. That had always been my contribution since Dad retired. Gary, he hated being called Dad after 50, mostly stayed out of things. The quiet enabler. Every month, like clockwork, I covered what needed covering. But now I did it while living in a glorified shed, while Brandon scrolled TikTok under heated blankets, and Tiffany ordered pregnancy pillows off Amazon with Mom's debit card. "Hey," Brandon called from the living room as I walked in from work one evening. The Wi-Fi's lagging again. "Can you reboot the router?" I looked at him, soaked from the October rain, my jacket dripping onto the tile. He didn't even glance up from his phone. I didn't answer. Just went to the hallway closet, found the router, and power cycled it like always. Diane left a list on the counter that day. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but I knew who it was for. My name wasn't written, but my place in the family pecking order was clear eggs, almond milk, again, paper towels, prenatal vitamins. No, please, no thanks. Just a list like I was the grocery mule expected to restock their life while mine hung together by duct tape. At work, Luis Chavez was the only person who even noticed I was unraveling. "You look like you wrestled a raccoon on the way in," he said, offering a crooked grin. "Garage life," I muttered, trying to make it sound like a joke. He laughed. "What, your man cave get condemned?" I shrugged. "Something like that." Luis paused, his smile fading just a bit. "Seriously though, you good?" "Yeah. Just tired," I said, even though I hadn't had a real night's sleep in weeks. The walls in the garage didn't block the cold or the sound. Brandon and Tiffany's late-night arguments, Gary's early morning coffee brewing, the damn neighborhood dog barking at 3 a.m. That night, after fixing the kitchen pipe for the second time in a week, Tiffany stood over the sink with her arms crossed. "It's leaking again," she said, like it was my fault the copper lines were older than both of us. "I just patched it 2 hours ago." "Then maybe you did it wrong." I didn't argue. I wiped my hands on a towel, tossed it on the counter, and stepped outside into the night air. The garage welcomed me with its damp corners and mildew-scented silence. The next morning, I woke to gray skies and the steady patter of rain against the garage door. My work boots were still wet from yesterday. I pulled them on anyway and slung my coat over my shoulders. As I headed toward the driveway, I looked up and saw Brandon through the window, bare-chested, walking into what used to be my room, stretching like a man who hadn't had a single worry in years. He shut the door behind him without a glance my way. I stood in the rain for a long moment, water soaking into my socks, watching that closed door like it was a tombstone. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Luis. "You always look tired, man. You good?" I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard. But I didn't reply. It wasn't one big blowout. It was the small cuts that bled me dry. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, and the garage roof, already patchy, started dripping right above my cot. I shifted the bed frame to the side, but no matter how I angled it, the steady tap-tap of water on concrete kept me awake. There was a small rusted bucket I'd found under the workbench, and I placed it under the leak. It filled by morning. Inside the house, no one said a word. Not a question about the water, not an offer to help. The only sound at breakfast was Tiffany sighing loudly over the microwave. "This thing takes forever," she muttered, jabbing at the keypad. "Literally 2 minutes for soup. I could grab a new one this weekend," I said. She didn't look at me, just said, "It's whatever." By the time I got to work, my boots were soaked again. Luis noticed, like he always did. "You must be collecting water in those things," he joked, nodding at the puddle forming under my chair. I gave him a half smile. "Garage life." He paused, then leaned closer. "You ever think about moving out?" I stared at the vending machine in front of us, its flickering lights casting jittery reflections across the floor. "This is my family," I said. Luis didn't push. He just nodded, tapped the side of the machine, and walked away with his trail mix. That day's paycheck came in short. Overtime cap. I stared at the deposit notification and did the math in my head. After rent for the garage, if I could even call it that, and groceries I was expected to buy, I'd have just enough left for gas and a few meals. Dinner that night was ramen again. No one noticed I didn't eat with them. No one asked. As I passed through the living room to get a spoon, I heard Mom's voice float from the couch. "Brandon's been such a rock. Helping Tiffany stay calm, keeping things together. I don't know what we'd do without him. Brandon the Rock." Brandon, who spent most of his time gaming or sleeping until noon. Brandon, who hadn't paid a bill in years. Back in the garage, I tried to ignore the ache in my jaw from clenching my teeth too long. I unpacked my work bag and found a card tucked inside, must have slipped in, when I grabbed lunch from the fridge. It was Tiffany's handwriting on the envelope addressed to Brandon. I stared at it for a long moment before curiosity won. Inside, happy birthday, babe. You've carried us all year. I couldn't have done this without you. You're everything. Carried us. I sat there for a moment, card in hand, stomach twisting. I'd fixed the plumbing, paid the bills, bought the groceries. I lived in the garage. And yet, he was the one who carried everyone. That night, the leak in the roof had spread. The bucket was full by midnight. I emptied it outside, water splashing onto my slippers, and came back to the sound of wind battering the walls. The house stayed warm and dry, glowing from the windows like a lantern I wasn't welcome near. At 2 a.m., I opened my phone and searched one-bedroom apartments near Springfield, OH. A dozen listings came up. Nothing fancy. Just enough space to stretch out without a lawnmower 3 feet from my pillow. I clicked through them, heart racing. My thumb hovered over the schedule a visit button. Then I closed the tab. Not yet. I lay back down on the damp hot water, tapping steadily from a new leak near the shelf. My breath hung in the air again, just like it had the night I first moved in. But something was different now. The silence didn't crush me like before. It sharpened me. I stared at the garage ceiling and whispered, "But soon." When a man begins to dream of silence, it means he's finally tired of screaming inside. It was just past 6 a.m. when I noticed my breath again. Each exhale misted into the freezing air of the garage like a secret trying to escape. I'd taken to waking early not by choice, but by the chill that slid through the thin walls and bit into my skin before the sun could offer relief. The mattress springs had frozen stiff on one side. I shifted bones, aching, reached for the thin hoodie I kept wrapped around my legs, and sat up slowly. Luis said it best the day before. "You work like a man with no home to return to." I didn't answer him at the time, just smiled like it was some kind of compliment. But the words stayed with me, clung to me. By mid-morning, I was standing behind the supply room door at work when Luis cornered me with a smirk and a piece of scrap paper. I asked around. He said, voice low, "There's a guy, Emilio, he's renting out the bottom floor of his duplex. Quiet street, 5 minutes from here. No lease, just cash and respect." I looked at the paper, then at him. "You think I'm ready?" "I think you're dying slow in that garage," he said. "This is oxygen." I tucked the note into my wallet. That evening, I took a detour before heading home and bought an envelope. I folded a $20 bill into it, then another. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I slipped the envelope between 2 broken panels in the garage wall behind a stack of paint cans no one had touched in years. Back at the house, Tiffany was waiting at the kitchen table, arms crossed, belly perched like a smug balloon. "Hey, can you clean this up?" she asked, gesturing vaguely to the dishes piled in the sink. "Brandon's tired." I didn't reply, just walked past her toward the fridge. From the corner of my eye, I saw Brandon in the living room, controller in hand, headset on, laughing with someone online. So tired. I washed the dishes. Not because she asked, but because I wanted them clean before I left for good. That night, I brought home a folder of spreadsheets from work. I didn't need them, not really, but it gave me a reason. A reason to start calling the garage something else in my mind. Not exile. Not punishment. Preparation. I told myself, just in case I need a quiet place soon. When I turned off the single bulb, I sat on the edge of the cot and stared at the dark outline of my boots. Then I opened my wallet and pulled out a yellow Post-it I'd scribbled on during lunch. 3 words in messy block letters. 3 more weeks. It didn't matter what day I left. It mattered that I was leaving. For the first time in months, I felt a pulse under the numbness. Luis and I stood outside the warehouse the next day, pretending to smoke as an excuse to get air. He handed me a pack of gum instead. I meant what I said. I told him, "If I vanish, I won't say goodbye. I'll just be gone." He looked at me for a long second, then nodded once. "Good," he said. "Make it clean." By then, I'd memorized the sound the garage door made when it opened. A soft groan at first, then the louder grind of the rollers. But I needed to be sure. At 3 a.m., I climbed out from under the stiff blanket and padded across the cold concrete floor in my socks. I reached the handle and turned it slowly. Click. Slide. I pushed the door up just an inch, just enough to hear it move. Then I pulled it back down. I didn't lock it. I just needed to know it opened quietly. They didn't notice when I stopped speaking, because they never really listened. By the middle of November, the house had shifted into something I didn't recognize. Ribbons, metallic balloons, glitter pink streamers. Tiffany was planning a gender reveal party like she was hosting the Oscars. I walked in one afternoon and nearly tripped over a box labeled Team Girl with little pacifier confetti spilling out. I bent down, scooped a handful off the carpet, and let them fall through my fingers. She was on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through Pinterest boards with a kind of militant joy. "We're thinking smoke cannons," she said. "Or maybe glitter-filled eggs. Either way, it's gonna be a whole vibe." I said nothing. I'd long since stopped responding to nonsense that didn't concern me. Apparently, that included everything now. Later that night, Brandon cornered me in the hallway holding a printout of a $300 crib with a matching dresser. "You used to help with this kind of stuff," he said, almost offensive. I stared at the paper, then at him. "I used to have a room here, too." He blinked. The silence between us stretched thin like an old wire about to snap. Then he shrugged, folded the paper, and left it on the kitchen table. The guilt trip came next, like clockwork. Diane caught me in the mudroom while I was putting on my coat. "You're acting cold lately," she said, her arms crossed, her voice low and theatrical. "We're all trying our best, Ethan." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. If I opened my mouth, I'd start naming everything they took from me. Space, dignity, voice, warmth, and I'd never stop. And they weren't ready to hear it. Or worse, they didn't care to. So I left. Dinner was meatloaf from what I could smell. I walked past the dining room, grabbed a microwavable burrito from the freezer, and retreated to the garage. I could hear them laughing through the walls, forks scraping plates, Tiffany's shrill voice rising above the others like a conductor cueing a full orchestra. The text came 5 minutes later. "Tiffany, of course. We're starting without you." I didn't respond. I didn't even open it fully. Just saw the preview on my cracked phone screen and slid it aside. Inside the garage, I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, unwrapping the burrito like it was some sacred ritual. The cold seeped into my legs, but I barely noticed anymore. I was learning to live with numbness. Luis had been quieter lately, not distant, just giving me space, maybe, letting me come to terms with what I already knew. "You're not angry," he'd said last week while we were unloading pallets in the back. "You're grieving. That's why you're still here." I didn't argue with that. I couldn't. By Friday, the signs were all around me. Tiffany had taken over the main bathroom, left her curling iron plugged and her hair products scattered like little landmines. Brandon's laundry somehow ended up in the garage, now sitting in a basket next to mine, like we were sharing a dorm. Diane had replaced the photos in the hallway. One of me at my college graduation had been swapped for a shot of Brandon holding Tiffany's bump. That evening, I found a grocery list folded and tucked under the windshield wiper of my car. My name was scribbled at the top, followed by a neat list of organic items: almond milk, oat bread, prenatal vitamins. No, please. No, can you? Just assumption. I didn't bring it inside. I stood by the trash can, unfolded the list slowly, then tore it in half. Then in half again. Then again, until the scraps were so small, the wind picked them up and carried them away like ash. That night, I sat in the garage with the heater Luis had loaned me humming faintly in the corner. I pulled out the envelope from its hiding place and counted the bills. I was halfway there. I turned on my phone thumb, hovering over the calculator app. Then I saw the notification. A new message. "Unit available. Come see it this Saturday. Emilio." I didn't leave that night, but something in me did. By the end of November, the garage window was fully rimmed in frost. I used to think the cold was what kept me awake, but I knew better now. It was the planning, the steady hum in my head ticking down the hours. I moved slower around the house, said less. Not out of anger. I was already past that. It was detachment, like someone quietly preparing to let go of something heavy they'd carried too long. That morning, I woke before sunrise, sat at the small folding table I'd set up next to the cot, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the logins for the electric and water accounts, both still under my name. I clicked through the settings and started the process to transfer or terminate services. When asked for a reason, I selected no longer residing at address. The screen flashed a confirmation, pending closure. I called to verify it, spoke politely. No emotion, just business. Afterward, I walked into the kitchen, still dark except for the fridge's humming light. I taped an envelope to it for December, $200. That was it. My final contribution, my last offering to the altar of quiet sacrifice. By noon, Diane had noticed. Her text lit up my phone. Why are the accounts showing pending closure? No greeting, no punctuation at the end. Just that flat, stunned demand. I didn't reply. There was nothing to explain that wouldn't sound like a betrayal to people who had betrayed me first. An hour later, Brandon came storming into the garage. The door slammed against the wall, shaking the old shelves. "You can't just pull the plug, man." I sat on the cot, folding a clean shirt into my suitcase. Didn't even look up. Silence, I'd found, was more powerful than rage. "You know how this'll look? You're just gonna vanish and leave Mom dealing with the bills." "What kind of—" He caught himself, tried to regroup. "You're acting selfish." Still, I said nothing. He eventually left, muttering something under his breath. I folded another shirt. That night, Luis called. "Still breathing?" he asked. "Barely." "You've got a showing this Saturday. 9 a.m., just show up. No pressure." I exhaled. Got it. The next day, I showed up. It was a small one-bedroom in a triplex. Nothing fancy. The carpet was worn and the kitchen tiles were cracked, but it was clean. Quiet. The kind of place where no one asked questions if you didn't want to talk. Emilio stood by the front window, arms crossed, explaining the rules. No parties. Rent's due the first. Heat's tricky in the back room. You good with cash? I nodded and pulled out the envelope I'd stuffed into my work bag. 3 months' rent in folded bills. It was everything I had, but it felt light leaving my hand. He handed me the keys without ceremony. "You need help moving in?" "No," I said. "I don't really have much." Back at the house, I parked my car in the same spot as always. But this time, it felt foreign, like I was visiting someone else's driveway. Inside, the lights were dim. Tiffany was asleep on the couch. Brandon snoring beside her. Diane was in the kitchen, eyes flicking toward me but saying nothing. Gary sat at the table nursing a beer. He looked up when I walked in. For a second, I thought he might speak. Instead, he reached behind him into the fridge, grabbed another beer, and handed it to me without a word. I took it. We sat there in silence, the TV low in the background, neither of us watching. And I found myself staring at him, wondering, does he know what I'm about to do? There's a sound that comes when you stop being afraid. Nothing. It had been 2 weeks since I signed the lease. I hadn't moved in yet. Not physically, but mentally, I'd already packed and left. Each morning, I woke in the garage with frost on the windows and breath in the air, but the weight that used to sit on my chest had lifted. I wasn't waiting for their permission anymore. The Wi-Fi cut out on a Tuesday. Brandon burst through the door of the garage like he owned the place. "Did you cancel the internet?" I was sitting on the cot, lacing up my boots, already half out the door. "I don't live here anymore," I said, without looking at him. He stood there blinking like someone just unplugged his brain. "You use it too." I shrugged. "Not my name on the contract anymore." He cursed under his breath and slammed the door behind him hard enough to rattle the brittle frame. I waited a few seconds, then chuckled to myself. For the first time in months, it didn't feel bitter, it felt clean. Thursday, Tiffany cornered me in the kitchen, arms crossed over her stomach like a queen making proclamations. "I need you to drive me to my prenatal appointment Friday," she said flatly. I didn't stop pouring my coffee. "Call an Uber." She looked stunned. "Are you serious?" I stirred in the sugar slowly. "Dead serious." "You're being petty," she hissed. I turned and met her eyes. "I'm being gone." Later that night, Diane caught me on my way out. "You're not acting like yourself," she said, her voice low and tired, like she'd been rehearsing the line. I paused in the doorway, one hand on the knob. "Maybe I'm finally myself." I didn't wait for her reply. That evening, I met Luis in the parking lot behind our workplace. He brought burgers. We didn't talk. We just sat in his truck, the heater barely working, the windows fogging slightly with each breath. I ate slowly, watching the traffic lights change colors on the edge of the lot. Luis didn't press. He knew silence had become my sanctuary. Somewhere between the second bite and the last sip of Coke, I realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. Least of all, my family. The meltdown came on Sunday. We were at dinner with family friends, people I hadn't seen since college. Brandon was tense, twitchy, stabbing at his food, while Tiffany rambled on about baby shower themes and guest lists. Then she said it. "Ethan used to help with everything." I don't know what happened, but he just stopped. Brandon dropped his fork. "I'm sick of this," he said, voice louder than necessary. "I'm doing everything, and he's just sitting in that damn garage like a king on his trash heap." The table went quiet. All eyes turned to me. I didn't flinch. I took another bite of green beans and chewed slowly. I wasn't giving them a show. After dessert, while people were putting on coats and saying their goodbyes, Diane pulled me aside. Her hands were shaking slightly as she clutched her wine glass. "I think you're trying to hurt us," she whispered, eyes watery. I met her gaze without blinking. "No," I said. "I'm just done saving you. People don't panic when you vanish. They panic when they realize they have to replace you." The wind howled as I carried the last of the boxes up the narrow staircase. No one was around, not to help, not to stop me, not even to ask why. The steps creaked under my boots and the cold bit at my fingers, but inside me something quiet had begun to bloom. I set the final box down in the corner of my new apartment, second floor, old building, paper, thin walls, and still somehow the warmest place I'd stepped into all year. There was no celebration, no champagne toast, no dramatic closing of a door behind me, just stillness. I didn't turn on music. I didn't turn on the TV. I turned off my phone. The silence was immediate and unfamiliar. No Tiffany calling my name, no Brandon yelling from the other room, no dishwasher running, no footsteps pacing above me. Just the hum of the radiator and the rustle of my own breath. I left my phone off for 48 hours. It was glorious. I unpacked slowly, placing each item with care. My work bag in the closet. My one good coat on the back of the chair. 2 mugs in the cupboard. A small electric kettle. I found myself boiling water just to fill the air with steam. The bed was a twin mattress on the floor with clean sheets. I laid down that first night and let the quiet wrap around me like a second blanket. I didn't dream. I didn't toss or turn. I just slept. On the third day, I turned the phone back on. It vibrated violently in my hand. Voicemails, missed calls, dozens of texts. The first was from Diane, time-stamped 2 nights ago. "Come home, Tiffany's in pain. Brandon's freaking out. I don't know what to do." The second was, "Brandon, did you cancel the heating oil? It's freezing in here. What the hell, man?" Another, "You left the garage a mess." And another, "Don't ignore me." I stared at the screen for a long time, then pressed and held the power button until it all went dark again. I made tea. I sat by the window. I opened a novel I hadn't touched in months. Outside snow was beginning to dust the street lamps. Inside the warmth crept through my toes. Around 8 p.m., there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Luis holding 2 paper bags from the burger joint we used to visit on our lunch breaks. "You settled in?" he asked. I nodded. "Come in." He stepped inside, took in the tiny room with a slow glance, then smiled. "You look 10 years lighter." I set the bags on the counter. I slept through the night. We sat on the floor, legs stretched out, eating burgers and watching the radiator hiss. He didn't ask about the messages. He didn't have to. When he left, I cleaned up, rinsed the mugs, and folded the blanket on the couch. I was about to turn off the lights when my phone, still dark on the table, buzzed once. Missed call. Dad, no message. Just the call. And that, more than anything, made me pause. Gary never called. Not once in all these years. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. I stared at the screen, heart suddenly heavy, not with guilt, but with questions. I wasn't cruel. I was invisible. And they finally noticed. The first email came on a Monday morning. Subject line: family responsibilities. I didn't recognize the sender right away. It was Gary's work address. He must have figured I wouldn't open anything from his personal one. "You can't just abandon your family," the email read. Not a greeting, not a question. Just that, like a slap to the face served on company letterhead. I stared at it for a while, sipping coffee from the chipped mug Luis gave me during move-in. Then I typed, "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm removing myself from abuse." I hit send before I could second-guess it. No paragraph. No apology. Just a truth that had waited far too long to be said. The second message was a voicemail from Diane. Her voice was shrill with panic, but still layered in control, like she couldn't decide if she was pleading or managing a crisis. The pipes burst in the laundry room. "Brandon doesn't know what to do. And Tiffany's due any day now. The heating's spotty. Can you just come by? We're not asking for much." I listened once, then deleted it. In my new apartment, I walked barefoot across the hardwood floors. I opened the windows and let the December air in. It was cold, yes, but it was mine. Luis came over that night to help me set up automatic payments. We sat cross-legged on the floor, laptops open, receipts spread out like a modest battlefield. "You're good now," he said, clicking the final confirmation. "No one can freeze you out. No one can cut your access." I nodded. Feels weird. Good weird. I had done more for myself in 3 weeks than my family had done for me in 3 years. I'd built stability where there was none. I'd created a rhythm: laundry every Thursday, groceries every Sunday, rent on the first. No chaos, no screaming, no veiled insults disguised as advice. Back at the house, I imagined the rot spreading, the dishwasher leaking, the thermostat blinking ERR, the fridge humming too loud, Tiffany yelling, Brandon deflecting, Diane sighing like a martyr in her own play. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because the gears I once kept oiled had ground to a halt. I hadn't been a son. I'd been a system. I dropped the garage key into a small padded envelope. No letter. Just a post-it note stuck to the plastic tag: "I won't need this anymore." The post office clerk glanced at the address and raised an eyebrow. Sending something close to home, I smiled. Something like that. By Thursday, another voicemail landed. Diane again. Her voice softer this time, almost brittle. "Please come to dinner this Sunday. We need to talk. All of us." She didn't say sorry. She didn't say why. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't sound like she was in control. They wanted a conversation. What they got was a verdict. The house looked exactly the same: white lights strung up around the porch, plastic reindeer staked in the lawn, the faint scent of cinnamon drifting from the kitchen. But something was off. The cheer looked forced, the warmth artificial, like they were trying to disguise a hollow. I stepped inside without ringing the bell. Diane looked up from the table, startled but not surprised. "Dinner's ready," she said, like I'd just come home from work. The table was set for 5. I hadn't eaten here in weeks. I wouldn't eat tonight. Tiffany smiled weakly. "I made the sweet potatoes you like." I didn't respond. I took my seat at the far end of the table. Gary nodded at me. No words. Brandon scoffed and stabbed a piece of ham with his fork like it had offended him. We ate in silence for a full minute, forks scraping plates, ice cubes clinking, the sound of people pretending to be normal. Tiffany cleared her throat. "So, Ethan, how's the new place?" I looked at her, then looked away. Brandon slammed his fork down. "Are you seriously just gonna let us drown?" I turned toward him calmly. "I gave up my room, my money, my sleep. And you all watched. No one spoke. You stood there, all of you, and watched me carry groceries, pay bills, sleep in a garage, and pretend it was normal." Diane's lip quivered. "We didn't mean, you meant it enough not to stop it." She started crying. Big, heaving sobs. I didn't move. Gary still said nothing, his hands folded like he was waiting out a storm. Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Okay, we get it. You're the victim." I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I'm the one who finally left." The silence was heavy now, like the air had thickened. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I placed it next to my empty plate. "These are your options," I said. 1. Keep doing what you're doing. Pretend this is normal. Make it work without me. 2. Apologize. Not with tears or gifts or guilt, but with change. Real change. And maybe over time we rebuild something. 3. Never contact me again. Brandon laughed bitterly. "Are you serious?" I stood. Dead serious. From my other pocket, I took out the house key. The original one, scratched old, taped once in the middle when it cracked. I placed it gently on the table beside the folded paper. "The garage is empty. Like your gratitude." No one said a word. Diane had stopped crying. Gary looked down at his plate. Tiffany just sat there, arms crossed. I walked to the door. No one followed. You don't need to shout when you've already walked away. Silence speaks louder than vengeance. I woke up without an alarm. No banging pipes. No footsteps overhead. Just the hush of winter outside and the hum of a working radiator. My phone lit up with a single notification, an email from Diane. The subject line read, "We miss you." I didn't open it right away. Instead, I made coffee, slowly letting the smell fill my small apartment. I sipped it on the windowsill, watching frost creep across the edge of the glass. Across the street, someone was struggling to carry a tree inside, laughing with their partner. It was peaceful, entirely detached from the noise I used to live in. Eventually, I clicked on the email. Diane had written 5 paragraphs. The first 2 were filled with what sounded like remorse. "We didn't realize you were hurting. We thought you were just quiet, not suffering." The next 2 pivoted softly but unmistakably into guilt tripping. "Your father is struggling with the heating. Brandon is overwhelmed. The holidays don't feel the same." The final paragraph was a quiet plea. "Come home for Christmas Eve, even just for an hour. Please." I closed the laptop. I didn't delete the message. I just let it sit. Around 3 in the afternoon, a knock rattled the apartment door. I wasn't expecting Luis. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Brandon stood there. No jacket, fists clenched, eyes bloodshot. "You moved out, what, a month ago? And everything's already a mess." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. "You think this is easy for us? You think walking away makes you a hero?" He pushed past me without asking and stood in the middle of my apartment, scanning the space like he'd never seen me as a person before. "Mom cries every night," he said. "Dad barely speaks. Tiffany's scared out of her mind. The garage flooded and no one noticed until it soaked the baby stuff. I see, I said. I begged you to just drive her once. Just once. I turned, finally meeting his eyes. You had every chance, Brandon. Every chance to act like a brother. Like a man. You chose comfort over character. Brandon's mouth tightened. He shook his head and stormed toward the door. Luis happened to be coming up the stairs at the same moment. The two of them nearly collided. Brandon turned back and shouted loud enough for neighbors to hear, "You think you're better than us!" I didn't raise my voice. No, I just think I deserve to breathe. Brandon left without slamming the door. That almost surprised me. Luis walked in carrying 2 coffees. Was that who I think it was? Yeah, I said, taking the drink. He brought the ghosts of Christmas past. Luis gave a half smile and settled onto the couch. We didn't talk about it further. We didn't need to. Later that night, as I stepped out to take the trash down, I noticed something slid under my door when I returned. A folded card. No envelope. On the front, a snowman. Inside, in Gary's unmistakable all-caps handwriting, "Garage is flooding. Dad's asking for you." Some people change when they suffer. Others just rot louder. The driveway was slick with ice, the sky a pale gray that promised snow but delivered nothing. I stepped out of the car, closed the door gently, and stood there for a moment, letting the quiet fill me before the chaos began. From the garage, I could already hear the shouting. I opened the side door and immediately felt it, the wetness, the cold slosh of water against my boots. The garage was flooded ankle deep. Boxes floated like soggy regrets. A stack of old photo albums leaned sideways against the washing machine, warped and ruined. My sleeping bag, once rolled neatly in the corner, now bobbed silently near the workbench. Gary stood by the circuit box, staring at it like it might apologize. "They said it'd hold until spring," he muttered. "Damn pipes. I should have flushed the system weeks ago." I didn't respond. He looked at me then. Not angry, not proud, just tired. "You always handled this stuff. You had a list, a schedule." "I don't live here," I said. He nodded, said nothing more. Inside the house, Tiffany was yelling, "Brandon, there's water leaking into the nursery. You said you put towels down." Diane's voice followed, panicked. "Can we call someone? Should we call someone?" "Maybe Ethan." She saw me then, standing in the threshold, soaked from the knees down. Her face twisted into something between relief and shame. "Please," she said, rushing toward me. "Just help this one time, please." I didn't move. "What's different this time?" She blinked. "What?" I repeated it slower. "What's different now?" Upstairs, Tiffany shrieked again. Brandon yelled back, his voice hoarse, slurring slightly. He was hungover, of course. Classic. I stepped into the house, dripping onto the tile. The hallway smelled like mildew and cinnamon-scented candles, panic and performance. I passed Diane, who reached for my arm but didn't quite touch it. In the garage, my old desk still sat in the corner, covered in dust but untouched. I knelt down, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a brown folder. Inside were Gary's pension forms. I had started helping him fill them out 2 years ago, but they'd been forgotten the moment Tiffany announced her pregnancy. I walked back into the hallway where Diane was waiting, mouth open, hoping for grace. I didn't give it to her. Instead, I placed the folder gently on the kitchen counter. The paper inside had warped slightly from the moisture in the air. Gary watched me with hollow eyes. He understood before anyone else did. "If you want help," I said, tapping the folder file, "these. If not, keep drowning. When people stop needing you, they forget you. But when they need you again, they remember you selectively." It was 3 days before Christmas. My apartment smelled faintly of pine from the candle Luis gave me. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, but inside it was warm still and mercifully mine. I had taken to leaving my phone on silent, letting the world knock until it got tired. Brandon's texts came in bursts, half-coherent apologies followed by venomous accusations. At 2 a.m., one message said, "I screwed up. Please." By 5 a.m., another read, "You abandoned us. Don't act like you're better." And then, the voicemail, Tiffany yelling in the background, Brandon cursing, the line going dead. I didn't answer. Louise suggested we hike out near Cedar Creek. Said the trails were empty this time of year, good for clearing out noise. We didn't talk much at first. Just the crunch of boots on frozen leaves, the occasional rustle of a squirrel startled by our presence. Eventually, he spoke. "You walked out with your spine intact." "That's rare." I shrugged. "I left because I had to. Not because I was brave." He looked over. "Sometimes that's the same thing." By the time we got back to the car, I'd almost forgotten my phone. I hadn't checked it all day, and when I finally turned it over in my hand, there were more messages. None from Diane. Only one from Tiffany. "I'm going to my mom's. This is toxic." She didn't say goodbye. Back at the apartment, I was mid-shower when someone knocked. 3 short raps, hesitant. Not Brandon. Not Diane. I pulled on jeans and a shirt, opened the door to find Gary standing there holding a half-full bottle of bourbon. "I brought this," he said, as if that explained anything. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly like someone visiting a museum of regret. He didn't sit, just stood near the window watching the cars pass. "I don't expect a drink," he said, voice low. I needed to look you in the eye." I said nothing. Let him twist. He turned to face me. The words took effort. "I let it happen. I watched them erase you." And I said nothing. I nodded once. "I know." Silence settled between us. Heavy but not hostile. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of mail, laid it on the table. "The pension paperwork's filed. First check comes next month." He paused. "That's because of you." Apologies aren't always words. Sometimes they're quiet acts done too late. I strung the lights carefully, looping each one with a steadiness I hadn't known I possessed. It was Christmas Eve, and for the first time since I was 15, I had a tree of my own. Nothing fancy, a secondhand fake pine from a local thrift store, but it stood tall by the window, its plastic needles catching the soft amber glow of lights. I didn't bother with ornaments. The light was enough. The radio played an old Bing Crosby tune in the background. My apartment smelled of cinnamon and pine from a candle I picked up the week before. The landlord passed by earlier, grumbling about salt for the stairs, but even he gave me a small nod and a faint smile. I realized I hadn't seen him smile before. The phone rang. I let it buzz 4 times before picking up. "Hello, it's quiet here," Gary said. His voice sounded older than I remembered. Too quiet. I wish you were around." I didn't answer right away. Just let the silence rest between us. "You have the pension paperwork, right?" I asked finally. Yeah, it's in. Should be good to go." "Good." Another pause. Then he cleared his throat. "You take care of yourself, son." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to carry the conversation anymore. The burden had shifted. He hung up first. There was a knock at the door not long after. I opened it to find Louise standing there holding a brown paper bag and wearing a ridiculous reindeer beanie. "Don't get sentimental," he said, handing it over. "I just didn't want you spending Christmas Eve eating instant noodles." I laughed honestly, fully. "You sure you're not secretly my guardian angel?" Louise pointed to the scarf poking out from the top of the bag. "Handmade." "Well, not by me. My sister knits when she's anxious." "She must be anxious a lot," I said, running a thumb across the soft wool. He shrugged. "She's a teacher." We sat for a while, splitting cookies and sipping tea. We didn't talk about my family. Didn't need to. The silence held enough history. After he left, I sat by the window, legs curled beneath me, watching snow drift down in quiet spirals. The apartment was warm, the radiator humming steadily. I reached for my phone. One missed call from Diane. One new voicemail. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the play button, then I moved it left and hit delete. I wasn't deleting a mother, I was deleting a pattern. The need to hear something that might sound like love but always came wrapped in guilt. I opened the voice memo app and recorded something instead. Brandon, I began, I hope you grow up. I really do. Not for me, but for your child. Being a father isn't about having a room, it's about showing up even when no one claps. Good luck. I hit send and closed the app. No need for a reply. Later that night, I stepped outside onto the porch, scarf wrapped around my neck, a cup of tea in hand. The snow was soft beneath my boots. Streetlights cast long shadows on the ground and everything felt still. Peace doesn't come in parades. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper unnoticed by the world, but when you feel it, you know. I looked up, watched the flakes fall one by one, and whispered, "It's over." I didn't disappear. I just stopped living for people who couldn't see me. The trail was slick with packed snow, each step up Glen Helen crunching softly beneath our boots. The sky was overcast, but the kind of overcast that glowed faintly as if the clouds themselves carried some buried light. Luis walked ahead, hands in his jacket pockets, scarf pulled tight around his neck. He didn't talk much during hikes, which is exactly why I brought him. It was New Year's Day. Fresh calendar, fresh trail. Not a single footprint ahead of us. I liked that. "So what now?" Luis asked over his shoulder. I adjusted my backpack and smiled, not at him, but at the question itself. "Now I live." He nodded like he understood, and maybe he did. We didn't fill the silence with more than we had to. There was something sacred in the stillness, like if we said too much, it might ruin the clean start. We reached the top just as the wind shifted. The valleys stretched below us, blanketed in white, untouched. I unzipped my jacket, pulled out my phone, and sat on a fallen log crusted with frost. My fingers hovered over the screen for a second, then I tapped open the voice messages folder. Diane's messages, Brandon's voicemails, Gary's clipped confessions. I didn't play them, I didn't need to. I knew every pause, every strained apology, every desperate request they tried to disguise as concern. My thumb moved with more clarity than I'd ever felt in that house. Delete, delete, delete. All of them. I reached into the side pocket of my pack and pulled out a small journal, the same one I used to scrawl half-awake thoughts in while lying on that cold garage cot. The same one I once hid under a pillow, like a secret I wasn't allowed to have. I flipped to a fresh page and wrote garage, the tomb they buried me in. But I crawled out. I didn't write anything else. That one sentence was enough. I stood, pulled the house key from my wallet, its edges worn smooth from years of being kept used, forgotten. It felt too light in my palm to have carried so much weight. Luis stepped beside me, watching but not speaking. I looked at the river below, a jagged cut through the snow flowing slow but steady, and I tossed the key. It didn't make a sound when it landed, not one I could hear. Just vanished beneath the current. That felt right. Not everything broken needs a bang to end. Some endings just dissolve quietly. I exhaled, and the breath clouded in front of me like fog leaving the body, like grief finally exiting the lungs. Luis broke the silence. "You ever think they'll change?" I didn't turn. Just kept watching the river. "Maybe," I said. "But I won't be waiting." They stripped him of space, dignity, and recognition. Yet in the end, they were the ones left scrambling in the silence he left behind. Justice didn't come with fireworks, but with the quiet removal of support they never thanked him for. Like the final toll of a long-ignored bell, fairness rang late, but it rang deep. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If you felt something was missing, hit 2. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that stand up to betrayal and fight for justice.